Hey now, welcome to another episode of the Refreshing Thoughts podcast. I am your host, Chris Fresh. And yeah, I wasn't going to record an episode this week because there's been a lot going on. Speaking of a lot going on, how good is our intro music by The Shine? On The Shine Worldwide, you can find them Spotify, YouTube, Tinder, Grinder, all those good places. They are doing rock and roll in the modern age as it should be, and have been doing it for a long time and still look better than I do. But thank you, Jules and Mino and PG3 and the boys. Um, but I thought I'd touch base because I've got a bit of quiet time as everybody's sleeping at home to sort of quickly reflect on the past week. I don't plan on getting into a huge big thing about my personal life, but I was very fortunate enough to connect with somebody that became my best friend, and Jesse and I um, found a profound connection and somehow managed to make it work, and we got married last week. And that's not what the focus of this episode is going to be about, but it's the precipice of it, And uh, we had a small wedding, which is sort of both of our preferences. But we were lucky that one of Jesse's sisters, came across from America for the wedding. And when we were putting out invites, we weren't sure. It was very late notice and everything. We weren't sure who was going to make it and who wasn't. And we've got a group of friends in Adelaide that we know through the Toy Power podcast, which I assume many of you have heard. It's one of the best toy podcasts in the world. We know Davey Damaged and Casey from Dave's Video Graveyard, and we also know him from the Radical Rewind Cinema Club, which he also does with Brett and Sarah Owen, who he also knows from the Adelaide Comic and Toy Fair. So, that's a lot of people and a lot of things that I've just flashed up on the screen, but you should go follow all those endeavors. These are great people. And we reached out to them not as a token thing because we didn't have to. It's when Jesse first came to Australia, um, we hopped in a car and did a road trip to Adelaide from Melbourne. And they were sort of like our first point of contact with humanity as a couple. And they were so warm and welcoming and nice that they have forever cemented a place in both of our hearts. And it was a no brainer that we would invite them to spend a special day without the expectation, really, they can make it because of work and family commitments of the last minute nature. And then all of a sudden it was, we're coming, we're coming, we're going to try and make it work, all of that. And they all genuinely tried making it work. A few of them couldn't make it. It's an expensive trip. You've got life commitments, but a large portion of them did. And we were blown away. And it got me thinking of, we always talk about how our generation, I guess I'm late Gen X, I'm born in 1979, but like we're the generation that sort of didn't grow up. The second Power of the Force 2 came out, and it was sort of, you've got Image Comics floating about, and McFarlane does Spawn toys and stuff, and all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, we're still into this stuff and we're older, and we don't have to just only follow sport and chase around our person of choice in some sort of mating ritual. That was a really weird way to put that. Next door's dog is really lonely because I don't think anyone's home. So if you hear a bit of yapping, it's I'm sorry about that. And if you don't hear it, then you go, stop being so sensitive, Chris. It just annoys me. But anyway, the the thing that sort of I love the most about being that generation is we connected in school in primary school with our friends, and then perhaps later in high school, of common interests. for me, a lot of the time it was professional wrestling. Oh, you like wrestling? I love wrestling. You know, or one of my good friends, we were both into the real Ghostbusters. Or you like He Man? You're like, I like He Man. You like Machine Men or GoBots? I like them too. That's how we connected as kids and formed pretty natural friendships. It's how our social groups grew. Now, I've got a very mixed relationship with whether I think the internet's a good thing or a bad thing. It's certainly provided many good things in my life, um, but its impact on society as a whole, I'm not entirely sold on just yet. And I don't think I'll live to see whether it's going to be viewed as a good turning point or a bad turning point in humanity's history. But what I will say is it has opened up the chance to connect with people that we normally would never ever get to meet. Normally would never, never, ever get to connect to with, but through those same means. So, you know, Dirty Uncle Mitch, that many of you that listen to the Geek Dudes podcast, where a lot of you would know me from, or from Hey Hey, it's a podcast, but I assume if you're listening to this, you would primarily know us from Geek Dudes. Mitch and I were both aspiring professional wrestlers very early on. I would turn my attention to commentating and booking and working behind the scenes in wrestling. And I don't know, Mitch just sort of did his own thing. But Mitch, better wrestler than I, I'm just more coordinated. Mitch more talented at a lot of things than me. But we sort of came from two, not rival groups, but two different factions in wrestling. And we wrestle a lot of street festivals, where there'd be food vendors, there'd be music, there'd be this and that. And sometimes they'd just set up a wrestling ring. And there was a show where I think both Mitch and I wrestled on. And my group of friends are wandering around, and his group of friends are wandering around. And I'm walking past, there's a stand that's selling helium balloons. And this is like around the year 2000. And yeah, we're old. And I couldn't believe what I'm seeing. There's a helium balloon, a foil helium balloon of like the 80s Masters of the Universe. Like, this is something you would have found at a royal show in Australia or a fair or something in like 1984. And it's for sale just at standard retail at this collector's fair. And I, I had to buy it immediately. And I go up and I buy this balloon, and I'm just holding it, just so happy, wandering around the fair. Mitch, who's a geek, like I'm a geek, but we didn't realize we're geeks. I think he was. You can hear Mitch's version of this events one day. We're going to have him on, and we'll chat about it. But Mitch is sort of like, what? Like, I don't think he was expecting me, of all people, to be wandering around so happily with a He-Man balloon. And I assume it would have been Mitch. He probably reached out, and we became friends because I can be a bit closed off at times. I'm not too sure. And we're lifelong friends. We've been each other's weddings. We played roles in our children's lives. Our children's are friends. We're lifelong friends, and the connection's begun because we both realize we're big kids at heart. And that's what I feel with the Adelaide crew, the Toy Power crew, the Days Video Graveyard crew, Radical Rewind Cinema Club, Adelaide Comic and Toy Fair, the only comic and toy fair. The people that use that name in Melbourne ripped it off from Brett and Sarah, and have screwed over somebody in Bendigo now. You're not great. But I'm not going to get into negativity. I'm talking about positivity. And, we've all connected over our love of toys and geeky things and movies and music and everything. And, it was sort of cute in a way of, I'm all nervous going, oh, I wonder what Ben Sachs is going to think of my toy room, or, getting to talk this sort of stuff with Davey and all of that. Like, I love that uh, our connections like that still bring us together, and it helps cultivate our friend group. You know, Julian James, the rock star, you would not believe how much of a geek he is. You know, massive DC Comics fan, big toy collector. Um, Jules actually pitched me an idea, which is fantastic, that he's going to come on and we're going to talk about 1989 Batmania and what that felt to live through and stuff. And he's got some amazing stories. I will focus this channel at some point, actually get to some longer form stuff and talk about that. But I was just these people that we've connected through toys to now come down to Melbourne, and it's not cheap. It looked like they had the best weekend. I was a little jealous that I didn't get to do everything with them. But we've connected not because we're sharing each other's podcasts or we're promoting each other or that. That's just a byproduct of friends. It's what you do for friends. It's because we've connected through common interests, you know, and we might not all be into the same stuff, but it's enough of it that we go, oh yeah, we can be mates. Like, let's have a drink and talk about this. Let's have a drink and talk about what we thought of Thunderbolts. Let's have a drink and talk about Andor. Because you can tell we're 18 plus. Well, let's not have a drink and let's just still talk about it anyway. And it's the same with Jonesy. Like Jonesy's probably Paul Jones, also that from Geek Dudes. And like it's the only one that really works on Hey, it's the podcast. He started buying more toys and sort of getting into that sort of side of himself through our podcast and greater friends group. And Jonesy, who probably knows these guys the least, caught up with them in Geelong, I believe, when they went to the Pop Culture Gallery. I don't know if they got to catch up with Brett up there and stuff, but there's another person that we've gotten to know. Like, we talk about toys a lot on here. We've been talking about tariffs. We've been talking about politics. There's been a bit of negativity. There's been amazing positivities of what it felt like for certain toys to come into my hands. But sort of what we don't talk about are the connections we make. And, there's somebody that I knew through sort of wrestling and her dating a good friend of mine a long time ago. Simona, you might have heard her referenced on here. She's a big supporter of the podcast I do. She's a collector, and we'll message occasionally back and forth, just talking about toys coming out or collectibles or a funny meme and stuff. And it's cool. Like, you can make these connections through the things we love. And I just think that's a really cool thing. I sort of don't want to be friends with people that aren't into that stuff because it's so boring. Oh, you don't have an opinion on the new Super 7 2003 Turtles? Oh, um, I just think it's a really cool thing that I'm now 46 and I'm making new friends. I can't help but notice Alison Troy, Master of Research from Geek Dad Life and Toy Geeks, and she's got her own um, channel, which is really cool. She does a lot of coloring and stuff. Like, she shared, hey, it's a podcast, just out of we don't really know each other, but there's a loose connection through, we're on the same Discord, we both like toys, all of that. Like, it's almost like these are our people and it's what we support. And I appreciated that. If anybody overseas did check out Hey, it's a podcast, they're going to be very confused. But B, I just appreciated the share. It's somebody I've never spoken to a single word, nothing like that. But we're just people that we like the same stuff. We might have different opinions of the same stuff, and that's what makes for cool conversations. They've been talking about, and Alison was just on an episode of Toy Geeks where they're talking about the Power of the Force line. And the return of Power of the Force 2 is such an important part of toy history, I think, for most collectors our age. I'm a Geek Dude slash DVD slash Toy Power slash Radical Rewind mega episode that we did. The podcast is up now. We sort of touch on that, and Scotty from Toy Power, he talks about, I think he's recollecting them and what an important part of him connecting with collecting again it was to him. And I told the story of I was friends with the Marshall brothers in school, and Casey was one of my best friends. He now lives in Queensland, so Casey and I don't really get to see each other anymore. But Casey had older brothers, and sort of they were the ones that sort of never let Star Wars go. So when I became friends with Casey, we got talking. It was like, oh yeah, I like Star Wars. I like Star Wars. And I remember walking down Toys R Us Northland, going down the aisle, and there's Power of the Force 2. I had no idea it was coming out. There's none of his internet stuff of, San Diego showing what's coming out soon. I wasn't checking out Toy Fair magazine or Wizard magazine or anything that would have been around that time. It was very much video game magazines and wrestling magazines. So I blindly go down this toy aisle and see this mass Star Wars toy display and like go home, call him on a landline and go, tell your brothers quick, there's new Star Wars toys at Toys R Us. You've got to trust me. And I think Jody, his brother, Brett, they both went down there and they bought out one of everything, I think. And it was the coolest. And, Casey had like Brett and Jody would get like the Spawn figures or the Youngblood figures, like Chapel and stuff. The Wetworks even, and have them on display. Like these were the early days of we're 15, 16, 17, and we're hanging on to this. And even through wrestling, like I found tape traders so I could get a hold of wrestling tapes and stuff since they weren't officially being released here in a timely fashion and stuff, underground tape trading and stuff. And then it was like I started recollecting Hasbro's because, somebody was like, do you want these toys I'm getting out and stuff? And it was like, yeah. And I remember how proud I was of I put the Winged Eagle belt that came with the Hasbro ring on the current champion. So I remember I had the belt on the Sid figure and I took it off. And after WrestleMania 13, I put it on the Undertaker. And then when he dropped it to Brett at SummerSlam 97, I took the belt off and I put it on Brett and stopped at Sean after 97 and the Montreal screw job. But yeah, but and that champion would be on top of my TV, my personal TV, which was hooked up to a PS1 and a Nintendo 64. Golden age, I'm telling you. But connecting through toys and things we love is what makes all of this worth it. And I think it's why I'm talking to you guys here. And I've talked about how this channel, I don't expect hundreds and thousands of, not hundreds of thousands, hundreds or thousands of views. I'm not expecting anything like that. What I'm hoping is we can connect and you hear me talk about things I'm passionate about and things my friends are passionate about. And I just, I know I'm sort of waffling and it's probably one of my not newsworthy or talking point worthy things, but it meant a lot to me that through toys and collecting and passion in my 40s, I'm still making friends that hopefully will be lifelong friends. You never know who's at the other end of the internet. And I will tell you to be very cautious with that. But we're also all human and, we're going to have fallings outs and highs and lows and whatever. But, I think what I like is with that crew is things don't get too heavy. We just keep it to stuff we love and what we're passionate about. Like every Sunday when the new Toy Power drops, it's one of the most exciting parts of the week for me. unless they're reviewing a movie that I haven't seen yet, and then I park it, and it's like I'll get back to that. But because it's like I'm getting to hear my friends talk about toys, and I'll laugh, I'll shoot them a message in response to something. Ben Sachs, he does the same when he checks out a Refreshing Thoughts or he checks out a Geek Dudes or something. And I really do enjoy it. And you know, talking to Davey and Casey, and they're geniuses. Like, as smutty as people say their podcast is and stuff, their knowledge of Australiana and TV and movies and everything is amazing. There's a bit of an age gap between us, so like I made them watch Mars Attacks or Highlander or something, and they're like, we don't want old Freshie and his old man shit movies on the show. But then we can talk about the 90s Mortal Kombat movie, cinematic genius. We could talk about Terminator 2 and how it's one of the greatest movies of all time, and the original Jurassic Park and stuff. Like, we can connect in that way. And and even through wrestling, Bulldog, who used to wrestle back in the day, he gave me a call during the week, and he's just recently been on a trip. But we got talking Star Wars, and Powers of the Force and all of this. And Bulldog and I have had our ups and downs over the years, like mostly ups. But what I liked was that we just talking Star Wars. We talked a bit of Bret Hart, talking Star Wars. It was just a good time. And it's just like, oh yeah, old mates talking about stuff we love. And I think that's why we're all aging better than the old. Like, I think on Toy Geeks they were saying that Aunt Beru was 45, uh, and they're laughing that they were calling her an old lady and everything. Um, and I think what's helping keep us young is taking on life's responsibilities because we can't avoid it, but sticking, not being forced to let go of passion and stuff that makes us feel good. Like getting around in geek t-shirts was always a sense of pride, or my toy room. Still going in and checking out the toy section in Big W and or Kmart and knowing they're not going to have anything. Making friends now with Colin Betts, who is super smart and political savvy and far too intelligent to be hanging out with this West Heidelberg boy. But Colin and I both have a passion for toys, and he's so articulate and well spoken and stuff, and such a nice guy. It continues to grow. I've got a friend, the big A, Adrian, who I used to work with, and we've reconnected, and it can start with sending each other memes on Instagram and stuff. But we caught up recently, and he and I used to work at the Northcote Plaza in Northcote, and I remember us on our lunch break shooting across to check out the newsagents and check out the Star Wars figures in Kmart and stuff like that. And we should be celebrating this. Like, yeah, things are hard. Toys are getting expensive. But what they can't price out are the friendships we're making through what's already out and what we're already passionate about. No, we might not be able to get everything that we'd like to get. Welcome to our entire lives. When we were kids, there were plenty of toys that we all wanted that for whatever reason we didn't get. Don't let me get started on the Castle Grayskull story. But what we do have is our passion, and the fact we can share our passion, and that's a beautiful thing. And I think what I've unlocked is not to get pigeonholed into just one passion, because whenever I got locked into just wrestling or just Star Wars, it becomes messy because people are too over passionate stuff. But if you keep it light enough that you're talking a broad spectrum, I just find it a little less contentious and confrontational. you know Loosey goosey is how I think you should keep it, because usually we've all got multiple passions. I look behind me, there's Voltron, there's Mask, there's GI Joe, there's Transformers. Mecha Godzilla still on my desk. I need a ding sound that I can play for that. Shout out to Brett Owen who did check to see that Mecha Godzilla was still on the desk. Um, Gaming, there were all these things that we all love. And I think if we let them flow through us, I haven't been out to my collection room much this week. And I wasn't even going to record, and I sort of just stepped out and just went, no, I'm going to do it. And I'm glad I did, because I want to let everybody know, whether you like me or not, that I appreciate you took the time to watch, and I appreciate our connections and all of that. And maybe we'll get chatting more. Maybe we'll become friends on social media and share memes or posts. Um, I've had Ewan and stuff recently who has reached out and stuff. There are always new people that we can connect with, and don't take it personally if I forget to mention you by name. It's not intentional. I'm sort of, as you can tell, I'm just riffing. I appreciate anybody that's taken the time to check this out. I appreciate anybody that's taken the time to, when I've posted a picture of something, to go really cool. Because it is really cool. And when we're posting latest hauls or new arrivals or whatever a Discord will call it, or we on our podcast and stuff, it's sort of nice just to hear everybody go, right on, I'm glad you got that. Like, cool. Even if it's just a like or a fire emoji or something, because it is a nice feeling when we get something nice for ourselves. And yeah, I don't have a lot more to say. I'm incredibly happy with how life's gone. It hasn't been perfect. It's been a bumpy few years. But I tell you what was perfect last weekend. It was beautiful. And it wasn't just beautiful because I got to marry my best friend. That's a large part of it. But it was also the coming together of people, you know, and we were very narrow in who we invited and who we wanted there. Just because it wasn't going to be big. But I looked out and I described it as when Miss Piggy married Kermit, and you look out and there's all these different Muppets, and even I think the Sesame Street. Because I remember as a kid, I've got to maybe my memory's wrong, but as a kid, I remember it as I was so excited that Sesame Street was also at the wedding and stuff. And I looked out, and there were the toy guys mixed in with the wrestling people, like mixed in with family. Like it was a beautiful mishmash of this of my ridiculous world. And I'm a part of their ridiculous world, and there's bright colors and bright hair and bright personalities. And it was a beautiful thing. And I'm very grateful. And, it's, if I can try and have more of this and less of the down, and it's never going to be a perfect science, but if I can, then my remaining years on this planet will be pretty good. Life's always going to have challenges, but I think one of the good things are the connections that we have with each other. So yeah, so please like this video, even if you're just listening to it. Go on and click like on it, share it. That really helps. We're Refreshing Thoughts. Refreshing Thoughts podcast, or Refreshing Thoughts pod, excuse me, on Instagram. I also have a Patreon, and thank you to everybody that has contributed. We've been able to cover Transistor FM and the hosting costs for the podcast and stuff. Long way from covering StreamYard, but that's okay. It's I'm doing this for me, but it's patreon.com/c/refreshing thoughts podcast/membership. If you have any spare change after your dolly buying, for $5 Australian a month, you can subscribe and help support the channel. I'm going to keep doing it anyway, which is a terrible way of plugging what I do. But yeah, I thank you to everybody, not just those who came out here, not just those that sent me messages, not just those that did likes or anything, but thank you to anybody that I've connected with in a positive way over stuff we enjoy and we're passionate about, because it's that simplicity that makes the complexity of life just that little bit more beautiful. Yeah, you're probably going to hear from me a bit sooner because I'm going to try and get back to my regular schedule. But this has been Refreshing Thoughts. I am Chris Fresh, and I'll speak to you in a little while.